Kia ora, my name is Cathi Barker and I'm from Software Solutions, and I'm taking you through a series of videos of functions, charting and more, my level 2 course in Excel. What I'd now like to look at is a group of functions that revolve around logical functions, a category called logical functions. And the most common function of all is the if function. Now in the file that accompanies your courseware, I'm just going to go to the sheet called first if. And I'm just going to hold the control key and wheel in a little bit. That's it. And what I've done here is I've given you a series of months, January through to December. And for each month, I've given you a budget. And I've asked you in response to record how much you've actually spent each month against that budget. Now, I want to be able to just see a status in column E, and I want to know if the actual is greater than the budget, then to say that we're over budget. And if the actual is less than the budget, then we're under budget. So immediately I'm starting to use the word if, which implies that I'm looking for an if function here. In E3, let's start by typing equals I. And this allows you to see the if function. Now the if function says that it checks whether a condition is met, and it returns one value if the result is true and another value if the result is false. Okay, so let's double click if. Now the if function has three what they call arguments, three parts that make up the if function. You can see here it needs some sort of logical test, and then there's a comma. It wants to know if the result of the test is true, comma, and then what to do if the result of the test is false. So three arguments or three parts of this formula. The test I want to perform is if D3, the actual value for January, is greater than. Now if you hold your shift and hit full stop, you'll get your greater than symbol. If D3 is greater than C3, that's my test. So now that I've completed my test, I can press comma. And notice how value of true goes bold. So that's Excel's way of saying, well, what do you want to do if that's true? Now, if that is true, if actual is greater than budgeted, then I'm over budget. And I want to say or show some text that says that. Now, text always has to go in double quotes, rabbit ears, whatever you like to call them. So I'm going to go double quote, and I'm going to go run now. Exclamation mark, double quote. So whatever you put inside of the double quote or the rabbit ears is what you want to show in E3 if D3 is greater than C3. You can put over budget, you can put anything. Now I'm going to press comma, and notice the value of false argument goes bold. So now Excel's wanting to know, well, what do you want to do if that's false? I'll put in double quotes, spend more, double quote. So if D3 is greater than C3, I click on this, that's my test. Then if that's true, that's my run now. And if it's false, then I want to say spend more. Again, I don't usually close the brackets. There's only one time that I do close the brackets, and you'll see that shortly. So I'm just going to press enter. And it basically says spend more. You've only spent $200 and you've got a $1,500 budget. Now, if I click on spend more and I double click my thin black cross, then that automatically fills it down. And keeping it real, there's a few months where I have to run. But there are months where I can spend more. Now, I think the great thing that we should put with an if statement is what we call conditional formatting. An if function checks if a condition is met and returns one value if it's true and another value if it's false. Well, conditional formatting sort of does the same thing. For example, I might say, look, if the result is run now, can we make it go red so it stands out? So on the Home tab in your ribbon, about halfway across is a button called Conditional Formatting. And if you click that button, you've got all sorts of options in here, but I'm just going to hone in on the Highlight Cell Rules. Highlight Cell Rules text that contains. What that option basically says is highlight the cells that contain certain text. Highlight cell rules, text that contains, and then it says here, format cells that contain the text, and it's wanting you to type. Format cells that contain, for me, the text run. By me typing run, I can immediately see format cells that contain the text run in that range I've selected with a light red fill and dark red text. Beautiful. So that's what I'm going to go for. So I'm going to go, okay, done. So now if I suddenly look at January's figure and it says spend more and I act accordingly, and I've now actually spent, say, $1,680, so I've overspent it. In D3, I type 1680, immediately says run now, goes red because I've spent more than my budget. Let's do another if statement. I want to do the same test but a different result. And so we'll click in F3 for this. To start an if function, we start with equals I. We double click if and we do our test. Same test, if D3 is greater than C3. Now if D3 is greater than C3, comma, I get to do the second argument. This time I don't want to show text. If D3 is greater than C3, then I'm over budget, and I really need to know how much am I over budget. Like, do I have to run really fast or can I go at a gentle pace? So I'm going to perform some sort of test. I'm going to say C3 minus D3. I don't put the double quotes in or the rabbit ears in because this is not text. This is actually a formula. If D3 is greater than C3, comma, show me C3 minus D3. If you put the double quotes around that, minus will be taken as a hyphen. It'll be taken as text, and that's not what we want. Then I'm going to press comma. Now, what if that's false? What if I haven't overspent? What do I want to show then? Well, I really want to show nothing. So to show nothing in a cell, we put double quote. Some people put a space, but I don't. I just put double quote, which is my way of saying show nothing. And so when I press enter, I can see I've blown it by $180, which is 1680 minus 1500, or 1500 minus 1680 to show it as a negative value. If I click on that result and then double click the thin black cross, those months where I'm told to run, it shows me how much I've blown it by and whether I need to take up a gallop or a slight canter. Those months where I haven't overspent, it hasn't shown me anything because I'm not really worried. I haven't overspent, so I'm not worried. But I think what we should do with this range highlighted again is make the ones that are less than 0, that is these negative values, I think they should go red. So let's go back to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, but instead of text that contains, which we chose last time, let's choose less than. Anything that is less than 0. I love the way it shows you before you go okay, so you know if you're on the right track or not. So format cells that are less than 0 to a light red fill with dark red text. Yes, perfect. Choose OK. And so there's a couple of examples of an if statement. An if statement has 3 arguments. It performs a test. What do you want to do if it's true? What do you want to do if it's false? You can do formulas, you can show nothing, or you can show text. But if you want to show text, you have to put it in double quotes. Okay, now that's a relatively simple if statement. A simple true, a simple false. The reality is life is a lot more complicated than that. Sometimes we want to say, oh, look, if it's this, do this, and if it's this, do that, and if it's this, do that, and so on and so forth. Let's go to another sheet in your exercise file called third if, and I'm just going to hold the control key and just zoom on in here. Now what we've got is a number of people and they have a result, and I want to group or bin these results into various grades. And what I'm saying here is if somebody got a result that was greater than 90, they deserve an A+. That would be Matt. If somebody got a result that was greater than 85, then they deserve an A. That's Carol. If somebody got a result greater than 80, then they deserve an A-, which is really nobody I can see at a glance. So let's do an if statement that is going to grade people with either an A+, an A, an A-, a B+, a B, a B-, a C+, a C, a C-, or a fail. So that's more than one test. In C2, we start with equals I. We double click if. I'm just going to hit the left arrow, but you can click on the cell if you wish. Left arrow. because I'm wanting the cell to the left of where I am. If B2 is greater than, let's start with the highest number. If it's greater than 90, that's my first test, comma. What do you want to do if that's true? I want to give them an A plus. That's text. So we go double quote, A plus, double quote, comma. Now it says, with the use of bold, what do you want to do if that's false? Well, my false is actually another test. My false is another test. So I have to go I and trigger the if function again. If B2 is greater than 85, so I'm dropping in fives. If it's greater than 85, comma, if that's true, double quote, they deserve an A. So if B2 is greater than 90, it's an A plus. If B2 is greater than 85, it's an A, comma. My false is another if. You can double click it, or I press tab. I can then click on B2, or I can hit the left arrow. Is greater than 80. Then that is an A minus, comma. If, tab, left arrow, greater than 75, because we're dropping in fives, then that is a B plus. If that is greater than 70, then that is a B. If that is greater than 65, then that is a B minus. If B2 is greater than 60, then that is a C plus. If that is greater than 55, then that is a C. If B2 is greater than 50, then that is a C minus, comma. My final false, what do I do with those who didn't get greater than 90, didn't get greater than 85, didn't get greater than 80? My final false is an F. Everybody else gets an F for whatever reason. Now, this is when I do close brackets, and that's because more than one is required and because Excel insists, so I have no choice. The easiest way to figure out how many closed brackets you want for your if statement is to count how many instances of if occur. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 if statements. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. See how they start to pair off? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they do pair off. Brackets are like ducks, they're always in pairs. And so when I press enter, that is my first grade. Matt gets an A plus. If I click on the A plus, double click the thin black cross, then it works out all the other grades. An if statement can have more than one true or false. They call it a nested if statement. Let me just double click it. It's a nested if statement, and this one had 9. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They can have up to 64. So they can get really big really quickly. Yes, and I'm just going to press escape. I think we should apply conditional formatting, just like we have in the earlier examples. I'm just going to select this range. I'm just sitting on this cell and pressing Control-Shift down arrow. I'm going to go to conditional formatting, and I'm going to highlight cell rules. I'm going to highlight cells that contain a certain text. If they contain an if, then I want them to have a light red fill with a dark red text, and OK. Now, the trick with conditional formatting is you can overlay more than one conditional format. So that's one. Let's go back to conditional formatting and add another conditional format to that range. Highlight cell rules, text that contains, and if it contains a C, then I'd like it to go green. And OK. So the C includes the ones with C minuses. So now let's add another one. Conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, text that contains C minus, make those ones go yellow. And you can see it doing it straight away. So the order in which you apply or overlay your conditional formatting is actually important as well. What if you wanted to change the order, or what if you wanted to manage the conditional formatting? With that range still highlighted, you'd go to conditional formatting and you'd manage the rules. And this is where it tells me that the first rule, the last one listed here, was applied to C2 to C15. And if a value contained an F, it goes red. If it contains a C, it goes green. If it contains a C minus, it can go yellow. And you can move them up and down with these particular buttons here and rearrange the order. But my point is also that you can overlay more than one conditional format. In fact, you can overlay 64 conditional formats in the same way as you can nest 64 if statements. So they're sort of related, these two features, and work well together. And so that's our nested if statement. Now, the next thing I also want to show you is the fact that we can mix the if statement with things like or and, which are also considered logical functions. Let's say I go to D1 and let's say I type the heading reset. And I come to the conclusion, if someone gets an F or if someone gets a C minus, then yes, they can reset. Otherwise, no, they can't reset. So in D2, I'm going to use the if and the or. If or. Two functions, or inside of the if. If or C2 equals an F, or C2 equals a C minus, close bracket. The OR function has its own pair of brackets. A comma separates each, that should be an equals. A comma separates each condition. You can have up to 255 conditions within those brackets. I've got 2. If C2 equals F or C2 equals a C minus, that's my test. So I go, comma. It says, what do you want to do if that's true? Then I just want to say yes, they can reset. What do you want to do if that's false? No, they don't need to reset. I will close the brackets because the brackets are getting a little bit more involved now. So if I click here, this is my test. If I click here, this is my true. If I click here, this is my false. And here is one of my logicals, and here is one of my logicals that belongs to the OR function. So I press enter. No, Matt doesn't need a reset. He got an A+. And then double click to fill it down. But yes, we're going to give Edward, Fred, George, Paul and Mary the opportunity to reset. I'm just going to put some borders on. So that's an example of an OR function. But we also logically not only mix if and or, we mix if and. Let's say we want to put these results or students into quartiles. And anybody that got greater than 75, between 175 is the top quartile, between 75 and 50 is the second quartile, between 50 and 25 is the third quartile, and anybody less than 25 falls into the fourth quartile. Sorry, folks. So in E2 equals I, if this result here, now I need an and. If and, if this result here is greater than, equal to, there's a variety of ways you can handle this, is greater than equal to 0, and this result here is less than equal to 25, then they close that off. That's my and. If that's true, they fall into the first quartile. No, the fourth quartile, the bottom quartile. If B2 is greater than 0 and B2 is less than 20 equal to 25, they fall into the fourth quartile. Comma. I'm at my false, I do another if. I do another and. And I say if B2 is greater than equal to, well, just greater than, because we've already dealt with greater than equal to 25. If it's greater than equal to 25 and B2 is less than or equal to 50, so it falls within that range, close the and, comma. If that's true, they fall into the third quartile. comma. If and B2 is greater than 50 and B2 is less than or equal to 75, close the and, comma, they fall into the second quartile, comma. If it's false, do another if. If and if B2 is greater than 75 and B2 is less than equal to 100, then if that's true, they fall into the first quartile. Otherwise, show nothing, because it means that they don't have a result. Double quote, show nothing. That's my final false. How many ifs are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an example of how you mix the and with the if. And just like the or function, the and has its own pair of brackets, each logical, and you can have up to 255, is separated by a comma. So if it's this and this and this and this and this and this and this, then if that's true, do that. So let's press enter. So Matt obviously falls into the first quartile, and if I double click it, I've got Matt and Carol in the first, Peter and Sue in the second, so on and so forth. And again, I'll just put my all borders on. That's an example of an and an example of an or mixed with the if. The last thing I'd like to show you is just the is functions. There's a group of is functions. If I just go out the side here, say, and go equals I, there is is. There is if something is blank, if it is an error, if it is an even number, if it is a formula, if it's not available, if it's non-text, if it is a number, if it's an odd number, things like that. You've got a whole lot of is functions. How do these work? For example, I might have a number here, and that might be sales. And then I have a number here, which is volume. And I want you to know per capita. So maybe this is 0. I want to put a formula that says equals that divided by that. Now that's going to cause an error because you're dividing it by 0, which to me actually is an error. It's a state, but it shows as an error. And so if this is 0, then I don't want to show an error. I just want to show 0. Let's modify this formula. If is error. If there is an error when you divide that by that, then just show a 0. Otherwise, show that divided by that. Close bracket. Is or is error? Use either. If that divided by that produces an error, is error, so the is error or is is looking for a true situation. So if H3 divided by I3 is an error, that's true, then show a 0. Otherwise show the actual value. And so I just get a 0 instead of a div. So have a look at the is functions as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's given you some ideas about the if function, conditional formatting, using the and function, the or function, the is error function, and you can overlay to 64 conditional format, and you can nest up to 64 if statements. Please like or subscribe, and I do hope I see you on the next video, where I'm going to take you through some really cool functions called count if, average if, sum if, even max if, and min ifs. See you soon. Ka kite.